All right, today we're diving into Lentor Garden Residences, and we're asking a pretty big question. Is this a smart move? With so much going on in Singapore's property market, we're really going to break down the strategy behind this project to figure out its actual value.
Okay, so let's get right to the heart of it. The one question every potential buyer is probably thinking. With a whole bunch of new condos popping up in one spot, is Lentor Garden Residences really the most strategic play for your money long term?
To figure that out, here's how we're going to tackle it. We'll start with the big picture, Lentor's massive transformation. Then we'll zoom right into the project itself, check out the competition, weigh the risks versus the rewards, and then wrap it all up with a solid playbook, no matter what kind of buyer you are.
First things first, you can't really understand a property without understanding its neighborhood. And let me tell you, Lentor's neighborhood has changed a lot. This isn't just some quiet, out-of-the-way area anymore. It's being very deliberately turned into a key residential hub.
And what's really wild is just how fast this all happened. For decades, Lentor was this sleepy little place with mostly low-rise houses. Then, bam, 2021, the Lentor MRT station opens up on a super important new line, and suddenly the government just floods the area with land sales. This wasn't some slow, gradual change. It was a full-on, planned overhaul.
And this wasn't by accident. There's a real master plan at work here. It's a carefully calculated government strategy to basically build a new community from scratch. The game plan is pretty clear. Pack in more housing right around the MRT, add new shops and places to hang out, and make sure the whole thing is easy and pleasant to walk around. It's textbook modern urban planning.
Okay, so with that big picture in mind, let's zoom in on the project we're here to talk about. Where does Lentor Garden Residences actually fit in this brand new landscape? What's its unique angle?
So, the basics are pretty straightforward. It's a 99-year leasehold condo in District 26, right in the middle of all these new developments. But its real identity, its whole strategy, really comes down to how it stacks up against its neighbors.
And this right here is the key difference. You had Lentor Modern, which was the first one out of the gate. It was the big, flashy launch that set the price for everyone else, and it came with its own mall built right in. Lentor Garden Residences, though, is making a totally different bet. It's what you'd call a pure residential play. It's focused on being a home, not a giant all-in-one destination.
So its main appeal is built around this focused idea. The goal is to offer a competitive price, highlight that it's just a short walk to the MRT, and really, to bet on the success of the entire Lentor area. The thinking is, as the whole neighborhood gets better and more desirable, this project will just rise along with it.
But here's the thing, this project isn't being built in a bubble, so we have to tackle its biggest challenge head-on. All the competition that's literally right next door.
Now you'd think with so much new supply hitting the market, prices would have to come down, right? Well, they've actually stayed pretty strong. And there are three main reasons for that. 1, developers paid a lot for the land, so there's a limit to how low they can go. 2, there's a really solid base of local demand. And 3, kind of ironically, having all these new projects together actually helps build up the Lentor brand and puts the area on the map. And this chart, this tells you everything about who is buying in Lentor. A huge 50% are HDB upgraders. These are Singaporean families selling their public housing flats to move into a private condo. They're a super steady local source of demand, and they often come from nearby areas like Ang Mo Kio. So this market isn't driven by crazy speculation, it's really powered by local families looking to level up their homes.
And if you're wondering why the market is so local, well, this number is the answer. A massive 60% stamp duty for foreign buyers basically acts like a wall, keeping most international money out. This makes sure that the Lentor cluster is, and probably will stay, a market for Singaporeans by Singaporeans.
So when you put all the pieces together, you can see how each project is trying to find its own little space in the market. Lentor Modern is the all-in-one with the shops. Lentor Hills Residences has that family-friendly nature vibe. And Lentor Garden Residences, it's positioning itself as the smart, pure and simple way to get into this growing neighborhood.
All right, let's get into the real number crunching part of this. No investment is a guaranteed win, so we have to do the strategic math here and really weigh the potential downsides against the fundamental strengths of the area.
Okay, let's be real about the risks. First, you've got cluster saturation. With thousands of new apartments all becoming available around the same time, prices might not jump up quickly in the short term. Second, interest rates. The buyers here rely on mortgages, so any rate hike is going to be felt. And finally, your exit plan. The government still has more land to sell nearby, and those future projects could put a cap on how much you can sell your place for down the road.
But then you flip the coin, and there are some really powerful long-term strengths here.
This whole transformation is led by the government, which means the important stuff, like the MRT, got built before people even move in, which is a huge advantage. The area also gets to borrow from the mature neighborhoods next door, so you've got access to good schools and services right away. And, importantly, it still feels relatively affordable compared to the insane prices you see closer to the city center. So, what does this all mean for growth? Well, here's a realistic way to look at it. The first few years are probably going to be a bit slow, with lots of new units and competition for renters. But as the area matures, as the shops open, and a real community starts to form, that's when you could see stronger growth, maybe 8 to 10 years out. It's a lot like what we saw happen in places like Jurong East.
Okay, so we've covered the what and the why. Let's finish up with the how. This last part is a super practical playbook with different advice depending on what kind of buyer you are. First up, if you're looking for a place to actually live in, you need to play the long game. Don't worry about the small price changes month to month. That's just noise. Your main focus should be on how livable the place is. Does the layout work for your family? Is it near the right schools? Can you actually picture yourself living here for the next 10 years? You got to prioritize the home over the asset. Now, if you're an investor, okay, you need to wear a completely different hat. For you, it's all about rental income and future profit. That means you should be looking at the smaller, more efficient units that are easier to rent out. And you have to be realistic about rental income, especially in the early years with all the competition. Most importantly, you have to be ready to hold on to the property for that 7 to 10 year period we talked about to really see the benefits. And finally, for the biggest group here, the HDB upgraders. This is all about being financially smart and safe. It's so easy to get caught up in the price per square foot, but that can be tricky. What you really need to look at is the total price, the final number on the check. Can you actually afford it? The most important thing is to have a good financial cushion. That's what will let you handle any market changes or interest rate hikes without stressing out. And that really brings us to the perfect final thought. Lentor Garden Residences isn't trying to be the fanciest or the cheapest project out there. It's not a wild, high-risk gamble. Instead, it's taking up this really smart, defensible middle ground. And in a complex market like Singapore's, that strategic middle ground is often the most stable and maybe even the smartest place to be.